Why don't we start with you a little bit? I don't know if people really know the full breadth and depth of your story, working with formerly and current incarcerated and also your artist work and all the things that impact society. Do you want to?
Well, hell, I'm with my superheroes here on stage, and they've dealt with it, and they've dealt with it and gone through it. I don't think I have to get in the middle of everybody's munching and chewing, but my whole thing. I was born in 1960. I grew up in Roosevelt, Long Island. I come from a community that, in the middle of the 70s, there was no such thing as a drug, a hard drug, or a gun. And by the end of the 70s, all of a sudden, on the cusp of Ronald Wilson Reagan running for president with his vice president George W. Bush, all of a sudden there was guns and drugs out of seemingly nowhere, and that started the devastation of the New York City area, and simultaneously the lower Southern California area, with a little bit of Miami tossed in there, in Florida, and the influx of guns and drugs. So I seen it happen in real time around me, and which also coincidentally started off with music going from turntablism into DJing into what we call today hip hop. So seeing these things and being a high schooler going into a college student at that particular time, not only did I absorb everything at that time that was in New York from 1976 at 16 years old to 26 when I started my career in 1986, the devastation, but I was able to chronicle it. I was an art student at the same time at Adelphi, got out in 1984, seen it in real time, partied in real time, rejected fraternities and sororities in real time, but wanted their money because we did the gigs and the party, it was the DJs, and saw all this stuff manifest into a snowballing effect across the United States of America and all the urban areas that we were going to visit as a recording artist playing this music of hip hop. And also that was a great swelling of, hence the prison industrial complex, which basically offered a dangling piece of fruit saying, well, there's the military industrial complex because Ronald Reagan said so. And if you really can't be all that you can be, there's the prison industrial complex that's waiting for your ass if you do not die and think that you can get a lot of money selling drugs. And that was the scenario that we rebelled against because we smelled it coming. And when we smelled it coming, it's right down the water in Long Island, we smelled it coming. And we wasn't necessarily in the boroughs, but you got cousins in the boroughs, you going to the city to party, you're only 15 minutes away from the line, 30 minutes away from Manhattan. How could you not actually see the devastation in real time in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, devastation? And then we saw it spread right throughout the 90s. So we rebelled against it. We immediately called it out for being some bullshit, and we saw it as being a gigantic trap for the foundation that was starting to really form solidly for what we call Black America in the mid-1970s when America was searching for itself. They went through a presidential confusion flipping where they couldn't even figure themselves out, but we as Black folks in the United States of America, Jimmy Carter came in, we at least said, we're gonna try to figure this out, and this dude right here don't seem like he's against us. So that 4-year period as we was coming up, COINTELPRO already figured out what was going to take us down. Public Enemy came out to actually speak on that, rebel against it, and call it out as being bullshit, and put it inside music to make people pop, rock, and dance because we were DJs, and we knew how to make people do that.
So, Larry, your critically acclaimed book, Jump, My Secret Journey from the Streets to the Boardroom, highlights the power of education and being given opportunity in driving social change. Can you share your thoughts on how those sectors can contribute to justice reform?
So, yeah, I, as was mentioned earlier, grew up in West Philadelphia. From the age of, all through, born and raised. I knew y'all were waiting for the rest of it, right? The playgrounds where I spent most of my days. No. I grew up in West Philly, and all through elementary school, I was, smartest kid in the class, teacher's pet kind of kid. But as I got closer to what was junior high school back then, I started to get pulled into the street. And I started to look up to people in the street and started to see them as the cool guys. And it got to a point where instead of trying to please my parents and teachers, it was more about pleasing people in the street and impressing people in the street. And so I ended up joining a gang, in and out of trouble. When I was 16 years old, I shot another kid and he died. I was arrested and charged as an adult. At 16, my family was able to scrape together money and get me an attorney. I pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. I was sentenced to 4.5 to 20 years. Did the 4.5, got out, still caught up in the system. And the last time I was arrested, I had 5 armed robbery charges. And that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, getting arrested that second time, because my oldest daughter had just been born, and I was really starting to realize and think about the fact that I wanted to change my life, but I didn't know what to do or how to do that. I ended up back in prison, and when I got there, they had a program where you could take college classes inside the jail. There were a number of colleges that were offering classes there, and at the time, Pell Grants were available for inmates, so you could take college classes and have the government pay for it. So the way the program was set up, you had to take a certain amount of classes inside the jail and then stay out of trouble. And then you could qualify to move into these trailers that were outside the prison wall, and you lived in those trailers and could leave every day and go to school and just have to be back to the trailers by 8 o'clock at night. And when I heard about that program, I was like, well, if I got to do time, I want to do it in the trailers. So I started working on and figuring out how I could get into that program. I got into the program, got my associate's degree at Montgomery County Community College in Pennsylvania, going back and forth every day. And then I transferred those credits to Temple University, moved to a halfway house in North Philadelphia, and got my bachelor's degree. And as I was about to graduate from Temple with my bachelor's degree, there was what was known as the Big 8 accounting firms at that point. And if you were graduating with a degree in accounting, your goal was to work for one of the Big 8. I ended up applying with them, and Arthur Andersen was like the one that I was really kind of focused on. So I ended up going there and spending the whole day interviewing with a number of people. And all day in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, should I share my background with these folks? Because all they knew is I was a young black man about to graduate with honors, with a degree, and they didn't have any clue about my background. So all day I'm thinking about it. Finally, I get to the last guy who was the hiring manager, and I decide I'm going to share my story with this guy. So I ended up, said, hey, I want to share with you and I start to tell him my story. And as I'm talking, I could see his face changing, and not in a positive way. And finally, I got done, and he said, wow, that's an amazing story. He said, I'm sure you're going to do well. And he reached in his pocket, pulled out an envelope, and he said, I have an offer letter here that I was all ready to give you, but I can't give it to you now. He said, I wish you the best, but I can't hire you. And at that point, I had to make a decision. And my initial thought was, I'm wasting my time with this shit. Like, they're not going to let me really do anything with this degree. This was all a waste of time for me. And but then I thought, you know what? I'm not gonna give up yet. I'm just not going to share this information anymore. And at that point, I decided that I wasn't going to share it. I wasn't going to volunteer the information. If it came up, or if I was asked about it, or I wasn't going to lie on an application or anything, but I wasn't going to volunteer the information. And for 40 years, that's how I built my career. And I was, every day, was nervous and anxious and worried that somehow it would come out and ruin everything that I had built up to that point. My oldest daughter, and I used to say she pushed me, but she likes to say, Dad, don't say pushed. So now she encouraged me she kept, Dad, you need to share this story. It can motivate and inspire some folks. And I pushed back on her. Finally, I agreed to do this, for her and I to work on it together. And we did. And this book came out about 3 years ago. And it's been incredible. The response to it has been incredible. I have learned so much about people that are actually doing good work in this field. I've also learned a lot about what are some of the things that need to be changed and what we can fix. I was fortunate enough that I was able to get an education, and that changed my life. That's what made the difference for me, the fact that I was able to get an education. But I know for a fact that there are tons of other talented, creative, intelligent people who, if given the opportunity, would change their life as well. And I just feel like we need to figure out how we can provide those opportunities for people. I made this comment earlier, but there's a commercial that's for a college, and the one line in the commercial is, in this world, talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. And to me, that's a very true statement, and I think one of our goals needs to be, how can we provide opportunities for people? I say this all the time, some of the most intelligent, creative people I ever met are people I met when I was incarcerated. So again, I believe that we have an incredible opportunity to fix this system and provide opportunities for people to be able to change their life.
Thank you, Larry. Before I pass the next question on to Ken, we often say at our summits, what you do is not who you are. And when you get to know people, when we stop, running 1,000,000 miles an hour because we have so many things to do, we're mothers and fathers and aunts and uncles and employees, sometimes you just need to slow down and really connect with people in a meaningful way. So we have an exercise that we'll get to later at the table, but I think that's a testimony, everybody's story is a testimony to get to know people, really get to know them. Ken, after 24 years of being in prison, including 9 years in solitary confinement, you emerged as a leader in civil rights and corporate social responsibility and raised $30 million. What motivated you to pursue this path, and how did you overcome the challenges you faced upon re-entry?
Thank you for that. It's really an honor for me to be here in front of all of you and to be in front of Chuck, who I grew up on. I'm from that hip hop era where, Chuck's music was protest music and where I came from. And Larry is not only my mentor, but he's become a good friend of mine over the last 3 years, so it's a privilege for me to be up here. My story isn't exactly like either one of theirs, and I would advise the trajectory that I went on to get to where I'm at. But it started with me doing 24 years in prison in California, 9 of those years in solitary confinement. And when I was in solitary confinement, I had the good fortune of having Stanford University and a corporate law firm by the name of Mayor Brown decide that my case was worthy to fight the state of California on. And we were successful in that because I was in solitary confinement for almost a decade for reading Black history and a lot of books about the Black Panther Party. So in 2019, I was released to Oakland, California, a place I'd never been, and was picked up by a public interest law firm to do paralegal work. And within a month of starting that job, the executive director, somebody who was a civil rights leader in California, Northern California, came to me and he said, "Ken, we knew that you could write legal briefs, you wrote your way out of prison, but we didn't know that you could talk." So he sent me to the state capitol and made me a state policy director, where I was fortunate enough and privileged enough to work with a lot of organizations to restore voting rights for people who had been convicted of crimes in California, and on the front end of a lot of policy reform around excessive sentencing, like 3-strike sentencing, fines and fees, and that type of thing. And one of the things that I noticed in my journey in the policy realm was how devastatingly wrong the reentry system was. It mirrored the prison system for people, where in California they give you $200 no matter how much time you've done and told you, here's a bus ticket to a big city near you and go fend for yourself. And looking at the landscape of what was happening in California, where there's 8,000 collateral consequences that stop people from accessing employment or housing or occupational licensing or things like that. It's almost impossible for somebody to come out after doing 5, 10, 15, 20 years in prison and establish themselves where they can access the middle class economy. So I started thinking to myself, like, how can I change this? How can I design something that's humane and reinstills dignity and gives access to our folks into tech and the knowledge-based economy and other things that were happening. And so I designed a program that I called at the time the Stanford of Reentry Programs, and started pitching the California legislature on what this looks like. And I got a little bit of traction because California, like most states, has been stuck doing the same thing for the last 50 years, and they've been getting the same result, which is about a 65%, 70% recidivism rate. And what I shared with the legislature, I said, the reason why you're getting those results is because you don't have anybody that's designing these things that's actually lived through it. So you don't have any proximity to the issues that you're trying to solve, and it kind of reminded me of colonialism a little bit, where they would set up shop and tell us what we needed. And I'm fond of the expression, no conversations about us without us. Right? And not only should you be honoring our voice, you should be honoring our leadership, because I'm the one that's going to tell you how to make it happen. So after a lot of conversations, the governor and the legislature agreed to give me a shot. I was 18 months out of prison at the time, and they gave me $28.5 million written into the California budget to build this thing out, which I did. It's operating now in Oakland, California. And shortly after that, this tech company in California, knocked on my door and said, we'd like for you to build out a corporate social responsibility program for us around this idea of fair chance hiring in corporate America, where people with records would still be given a chance, if they were the best person for the job, to access corporate jobs and corporate money, which was really unheard of, especially in the tech sector. So that was a very interesting opportunity to me. And in addition to that, if I'm being completely transparent, tech money pays a lot different than nonprofit money. So they asked me to come do that and build out a corporate foundation for them, and that's where I've been the last 3 years. And during that journey is where I met Larry. I had the great privilege to meet Larry, and he invited me up a few years ago to the Nike campus, and we spent a day together and just found we had a lot in common in our journeys and trajectories and the things that were important to us as far as values. And we started kind of thinking about what we could do to change the scene nationally together, taking our lived experience and our corporate experience and seeing how we could sprinkle that across America to change, to have narrative change and provide space and opportunity for brothers and sisters coming out of prison. And that all culminated, I guess, a few months ago, where we joined the Just Trust, which the idea behind the foundation was for them to change the face of criminal justice reform in America and fund organizations from New York to Florida to Northern California to everywhere. Specifically, they're operating a lot in the South right now. And so we joined a few months ago, and we're going to build out a program for apprenticeships and internships for within sports and with entertainment to really help justice-impacted men and women get access to livable wage jobs and access to economic mobility. And we think that the big driver in narrative change is sports. We think the big driver in narrative change is entertainment. We know that we live in popular culture, and these are the things that move society. Sports figures, athletes, entertainers, and what they say matters in this country. So we plan to leverage that and be able to create space for everybody.
Chuck, many years ago, you and I met when I was living in Nashville. And at the time, I did an event called Politicians and Musicians to help young kids get involved in the voting process. And Chuck was gracious enough to be there on stage and crushed it, as always. So during that time, Chuck, you were talking a little bit about how you would go into the jails and you would talk to the inmates about how they should be thinking. Can you talk a little bit about your work then, or what you've learned, or what anybody you may have helped, or anything in between?
Well, I first started going to prison systems as an artist in 1988, and I was immediately banned. Rikers, we went into Rikers, and it was a big world story. But then we found out there was other prison systems that wasn't going to allow me to be Johnny Cash. But I said, hell, I'm not the man in black, I'm the blackened man. But anyway, so immediately what we tried to do on the outside, in lieu of things like what Ken does, is like, everybody seems to love entertainment, but know very little about it. We come from a time 60, 70 years ago where somebody in our household would know how to play something, would tell you about music, and if not, they were a fan of, oh yeah, the bass player for Earth, Wind & Fire is Verdine White. Well, fast forward into this century, it's like, okay, the black music is popular culture, but very few know anything about it other than what they see right in front of the show and never the business. So what we would do, at least when we were allowed into the prison systems, was like making sure that there would be enough engagement into what they loved and what they said they liked to not go into prison, because the bureaucracy and you need people like Ken who actually understands, and then later on it happened to be where, okay, this is a person that understands what this system is. We didn't have these people coming from the entertainment business. Matter of fact, we were part of the entertainment business with no management that sort of kind of got by kind of like default, ushered people into the prison industrial complex. We rebelled against that. We also knew that the school systems, and just look at every day, look at the school systems now and when y'all went to school. The football team and the basketball team is exalted to the highest of the highest. The arts programs stop at 6th grade. Nobody goes to the school plays, but everybody wants to be in movies. They've got all kinds of Netflix and Hulu subscribers to movies. But the young people that said, okay, I love movies, I don't even think I could ever be an actor, but if I want to be an actor, where do I start? If somebody wants to be an athlete, they say, yo, you know what, star on your school team, at least you got a chance to try out. So we knew with this dichotomy and this difference that the arts and education are at rock bottom, but everybody, even if they're an athlete, wants to be involved with music, entertainment. They all gonna flock to it. And very few of us are at the table of negotiation of making sure that this country is educated on the art form that they all love. So it was more like an outside program, and then when a person goes inside, it was like a door was shut. And then when this century opened up, to have such people like Larry and Ken open up the doors and say, you got to be able to give some kind of opportunity for somebody that might have a skill set or a love to know that it's more than just being a rapper on the mic or a singer on the mic or being able to put a prison band. Those days are long over. So my thing was like, how do we build a structure on the outside for not only young people or the community to be able to say, this is what this art form is about. These are the opportunities. You want to talk about skill set and job opportunities? The job opportunities in the entertainment business and the music business are 100,000-fold. But also we come from a time when we watch a film and nobody wants to stay for the credits. And then when you look at the credits, if you want to say a name is black or not black, there ain't a lot of black names on the end credits. And then this is, we're programmed to be like movie over or movie click, fuck it, I'm out of here, right? But them credits will go on and on and on. And where's the skill set to say, well, damn, I'm in the graphic arts. I know that I could apply this to that. I have a skill that I could manifest into this industry or whatever. These are the things that did not exist before 1999, 2010, 2000. That's why I said these gentlemen up here were superheroes. And we're in a time right now, I'm gonna just add this little caveat. Most recently, I was named a U.S. Music Ambassador, but that was like a YouTube play into the Jazz Ambassador program or whatever, and immediately I was vilified for taking a picture next to Blinken. And I'm trying to tell these people, I said, no, number one, I'm already a world ambassador. It's the United States is recognizing me. And I felt that hip hop should not have technology, government, and industry govern it, and that somebody has done it should be able to look to the rest of the world that I'm in an area of peace and harmony and connectivity, being the 116 countries I'm into, and I'm not in the language of blood, bombs, and blood bullets and bombs like that. So immediately a radical left started chewing at me, and I said, see, I smell isms there. You know what the ism is? The ism is that you ain't used to a nigga being at the table. And y'all, many of y'all folks have felt that too. A nigga can't be at the negotiation table for war or anything in order to bring peace. So when I actually but then again, a lot of them are bots and trolls online anyway, so give a fuck about them. But I'm saying that comes down to the point of there has already been a formulation of us not being in the administration and management of these areas of industry, government, and technology that usher us right back in the prison industrial system. And that's why I say these gentlemen are my superheroes. Because for years I was screaming about this, but they were invisible wars that nobody said. Many of y'all are invisible wars. The average person that y'all know, y'all grew up around, if you tell them what you do, they'd be like, yeah, and what? Right? So we got to eliminate some of the invisible wars, because if we don't control that narrative, then our narrative will be spewed out there in popular culture, and then it's a time where everybody got a mic. They'll be saying anything about an important position that we need to hold.
All that. Yeah, thank you. So much to unpack here and so much work to do, but what do they say? The journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, and right here you're looking at the people that are on that journey. Larry, how did your experiences growing up and being incarcerated in the prison shape your leadership style and approach to opportunity and business?
I think, growing up in the streets and going through the things that I went through, and then going through the whole prison system, there have been some benefits for me to that. I think one is, one of the things that people say about me in work is like, well, you don't get upset or excited about stuff. I'm like, well, ain't nobody got a gun to my head. I'm not in front of a judge fighting for my life. We can figure out how to sell these shoes, you know what I mean? So that, but then also I think it's helped me to maintain a sense of humility and humbleness, because one of the things I've never done is try to, even though I never talked about what happened and how I grew up, and I never left it. Like every time I would go back to Philly, I would go visit my friend who was my best friend when I was there, who just got out a few years ago after 52 years. And I maintained that connection, would go by and see his mother before she passed, just because, again, I still look back at that experience as being a blessing to me, because that experience is what really allowed me to change my life. And so for me, looking at how we can help people to improve their lives, one of the things I'm really excited and happy about is that Harvard Business School decided to do a case study based on my book. And they did a really good job of it. They built some real good context around the story and the case. But one of the charts they had in there showed that 92% of people who are incarcerated at some point are going to get out. The goal should be they come out better people than they were when they went in. And the only way that's going to happen is if we change the system to make that happen. And right now, like the program that I was involved in that allowed me to change my life was eliminated in the mid-90s. So that program doesn't exist anymore. If I was coming out today, I wouldn't be able to do what I've been able to do, because the program that allowed me to get an education doesn't exist anymore. Another chart that was in the Harvard study was, so recidivism rate nationally is somewhere in the 70s, like 75, 77%, somewhere in there, meaning within 2 to 3 years, people get out, they're back in the system. But the chart showed that if someone learns a skill or a trade where they can have a livable wage, where they can make enough money to sustain their life, 77% drops to 30%. And if folks who are able to get a bachelor's degree, 77% drops to 6%. And a master's degree is at 0. So to me, this is a clear-cut indication that education, teaching people skill sets that will allow them to have a sustainable, changes people's lives. And I think, to me, that's one of the ways that we can reduce recidivism, and we can actually have an impact on crime in this country by reducing recidivism, by helping train people and prepare people so that when they get out, they can have or earn a livable wage. And that's one of the things he always talks about, is that this is really an economic issue, much more so than it is a social or whatever. It's an economic issue, and that's what drives people back to prison.
So one of the first ways that Larry and I connected a few years ago was we were talking in that side office over there at the Nike campus, and Larry said, you know, when I was younger, Ken, I used to say to myself, if I could just make $400 a week.
It was 500.
$500 a week. $500 a week. I'd be out of the game. I'd get off the streets, and that was an economic indicator that he was expressing to me at the time. And I said, damn. I said, I grew up 3,000 miles away from you in South Central Los Angeles, and I used to say when I was growing up, if I could just make $1,000 a week, I'd never touch the streets again. Legitimate $1,000 a week in a job. And so we connected on that and understood that really what faces young black men, 1 out of every 3 black men will touch a prison cell in their lifetime in this country. 49% of black men have had handcuffs on them before in this country. So for me, it's really a crisis when you talk about our folks going into the justice system. And most of that, in many cases, is an economic issue. A lot of the things that happen in our community stem from the symptoms of poverty. And I know a lot of cats, and I know Larry does too, and I know people who would be considered like the hardest gang members in America, and if you give them a $70,000 a year job, they're the first ones in before the street lights come on. They're teaching a Little League baseball game. They're the most loyal workers. They work hard. They do it all because they have a stake in the game. And what causes us a lot when we're younger, Larry talked about the streets called, and I went through the same thing when I was in my teenage years. When you feel like the system is not for you, when you feel like you can't see light to a pathway to the middle class economy or economic mobility, you have a tendency to say, fuck it. And you take on this nihilistic kind of mindset to where you're willing to get money or do whatever you need to do to survive to get ahead because you don't see a pathway. And so part of my life's work and Larry's life work is to be able to show brothers and sisters shoulder by shoulder that there is a pathway for you to get there, that you don't have to play the margins, you don't have to face the snares and the traps by skill development, education, getting a college degree, short duration programs, and pathway yourself to get the things that you want to in the economy. So I can't understate that enough, that it really is an issue around poverty in most cases. It's not going to eradicate 100%, but it's going to eradicate a lot of it, especially for our folks.
And so another question for you is, you've been instrumental in advancing policy change, designing tech training campus, and securing tens of millions in funding for it. How do you see technology and education playing a role in providing opportunities for justice-impacted individuals?
Yeah, it's a question I'm very passionate about because I understand the history of this country, especially for people who have melanin in their skin, is that our value proposition to the stakeholders and the power holders has been our physicality. Right? And for people coming out of prison, the first thing they say is that you need to pick up a wheelbarrow or you need to do something with your physical brawn because we come from where we come from, especially us as black men. And for me, you know, like Chuck says, I rebel against that notion. And I'm a firm believer, and I've talked to thousands and thousands of brothers and sisters who have a great capacity, intellectual capacity and creative capacity to add value not only to this society but to this world. And so I reject the notion that I have to use my muscle or my strength or my masculinity to get ahead for a career to earn $1. Like I feel like I can get in a room with the best intellects from Harvard and anywhere else and punch pound for pound. And so what I'm really interested in is teaching brothers and sisters to exercise that intellectual capacity and those gifts that we have, not just from our brawn, but from our mentals. And I think that we've seen through what we've done in the arts with jazz and hip hop and business and all the other things that we can do that. And that's why I love Larry's story so much, is because Larry wasn't an athlete. I think I can say that. You said that yourself. He wasn't ready to go pro into pro sports, but what he did is he got his education and became a giant behind the scenes. Like when I say a giant, I talk to white business leaders all the time and I say Larry Miller is a case study for why every single boardroom in America, why every single C-suite in America needs a Larry Miller who came from the hood, who had a different type of lived experience, because he's the one that's going to make you a lot of money, right? Yeah, 100%. So anyway, that's no, but it's true though, right? I mean, what Larry did with the Jordan brand is something that cats from Yale and Harvard and other people could have never brought to the table because they couldn't see it. They hadn't lived it. They haven't touched it and smelt it. And Larry had went through all of that and was able to bring that knowledge and that perspective to the table to build $8 billion brand now? So yeah, so I mean,
Say that louder for the people in the back.
An $8 billion brand.
From what?
At the Jordan brand. I think you were.
Well, when I first got involved with Jordan Brand, it was about $140, $150 million business.
And you built it to what?
Somewhere should be
Or
7
just,
and 8.
yeah, just a couple of pennies difference. Okay.
We did okay.
All right. So this is for both you and Larry, Ken. The power of the narrative is central to your new project with the Just Trust. How do you plan on shifting public perceptions and create a more inclusive narrative for justice-impacted individuals?
Yeah, I think the power of story, right? Lifting Larry's story, I've had the privilege to witness how Larry's story has unfolded not only in the business community, but also in the nonprofit community, the criminal justice reform community. He's really provided a light to millions of people at this point who never thought his journey was possible. So we really think by leveraging storytelling through art, through sports, through all of those things that we can show people, we can change the narrative not only for what's possible for ourselves, right? Because we often suffer from limited expectations of ourselves, those of us who have been justice involved, but also change the narrative in society, right? Because someone has a record or someone experienced something, we shouldn't be defined in perpetuity for the worst thing that we ever did. And there's a whole lot of untapped potential. I mean, for those of you who don't know this, there's 80 million people in America that have a criminal record. The Justice Department says it's going to be 100 million by 2030, which is 1/3 of the American workforce. And so what we're really trying to do is say, hey, yes, what happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago happened, right? But people should still be given opportunity and space to be able to reskill, upskill, enter the workforce, take care of themselves, and be a positive contribution to society. So I think what we plan to do is leverage storytelling through sports and entertainment, et cetera, to tell those stories and to change the narrative in this country about what that means.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And the only thing that I would add is I never will say that someone commits a crime, they shouldn't pay for that crime. You should pay for, if you commit a crime, you should pay for it. But that doesn't mean that the rest of your life should be ruined, that you have no life after that. It should mean you serve your time, you pay your debt, and then you're allowed and able to move on. And the way the system is set up today, that's absolutely not the case. Today, you know, that hangs over you, and it just hangs from the time you get out, it hangs over you for 40, 50 years. I can't get TSA pre, because when I signed up for it, they they denied me. Like, no, you can't get it for something that happened 40, 50 years ago. That's still kind of hanging over. So to me, yeah, we just have to figure out a way to, you know, get people, have people be able to acclimate and come back into the system and into society and into their communities, and like Ken said, become contributors to their community. And you know, that's only going to happen if we're able to make it happen.
I'd like to add just one thing on that too, Larry. Thank you for that. Is that when people come home from prison, and there's 600,000 people that get out a year, if we are not providing them access to livable wage employment, if we're not providing them access to housing, if we're not providing them access to enter university campuses and the 44,000 collateral consequences I mentioned earlier, mostly around occupational licensing and things like that. And it's so silly and ridiculous, because in prison they'll have you cut hair as a job in prison. But when you get out of prison, you can't get a cosmetology license to cut hair professionally. Even if you're the best barber in America and cut hair for 20 years in prison, you can't do it when you're on the streets to make a living. And so I haven't heard yet from in the hundreds of policy conversations I've had of what we expect people to do when you let somebody out of prison at 35, 40 years old to a big city and you say, go fend for yourself, and you can't get a job because you have a felony on your jacket, right? And you're not providing access. And so it's really important that we all take responsibility for being able to push to give people space and opportunity so they can fend for themselves and take care of their children and take care of their spouses and their significant others and fend for themselves. I mean, believe it or not, no one's in prison sitting around thinking about how much kilos of cocaine they can sell when they get out. Seriously though, people are thinking about like, damn, what am I gonna do to survive? How can I get a job? What can I do for a living? How can I reconnect with my mother or my baby's mother or, you know, my children and provide for them and be a better father? And no matter what we do in prison, most of the time, it's a testament. Larry couldn't tell people that he was in prison. You know, he had to hold that a secret. That's what his book is about for 20, 30, 40 years because of the stigma that society attached. And without that stigma, we see what he was able to achieve, right? When he was provided space, he made that space for himself. For many people with background checks and all of that stuff, 96% of employers, I think, do background checks. Many people don't get the opportunity to hold it a secret because there's a background check being run on them. So it's important that we have these policy conversations and these society conversations to talk about what redemption and transformation looks like for people.
Thank you. How many people here either have themselves or know somebody that's been negatively impacted by the justice system?
Wow. The whole room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we find there's a lot of movements and missions and initiatives that we don't know about. How many people would have heard of the Just Trust if we didn't have this event tonight? Or how many people knew Ken Oliver before you came here tonight and his story, right? There's 1,000 stories out there like that. But so I've been working with Carnegie Hall. I've been an advisor to them for 12 years and got them Robert Smith on the board. So he's the first black chairman of the board of Carnegie Hall after 130 years. And he's given them the largest gift they've ever gotten in 130 years, or probably will ever get in another 130 years. So it's important to have people in important places and spaces. However, they have been working in the justice system for over 2 decades. And most people don't know that. So they go into Sing Sing. They help the inmates write and perform music, and if they can't write, they'll just perform, or vice versa. And there was one gentleman that, in particular, unfortunate story, somebody gave him a gun in a neighborhood and just said, it's not a good neighborhood, protect yourself. He'd never thought about it or needed it, and was out with his son one day at a movie theater. And he felt threatened, he felt like his son was threatened, he pulled the trigger and he killed somebody. So he was incarcerated for about 20 years. He said a 3-second decision changed his entire life. But because of the music program with Carnegie Hall, the day he got out of prison, he went right to Carnegie Hall and performed on stage and has had a music career ever since. So the recidivism rate for the music program that they do in the jails when people get out, it's 0. And that's the work that Carnegie Hall does. So it's important to know about these things and then create, partnerships. Chuck, with all the work that you've done and all the places that you've been around the world and hearing the story and having your own experience, talking to individuals themselves and getting to know them and their heart, what do you think are some of the solutions that are needed today based on your conversations with these individuals?
Well, number one, we have to think that we are the world. And when you look at 214 countries in the world, and we're one of them, we can't think that this is the only place. There are models that actually we can learn from, and there's also places that we don't want to be. And then I think another thing that we need cultural GPS. For as much as we're connected together, do we know as much as our people knew in 1966 when we had that jet every week and that ebony every month? You know what I'm saying? We seem to be on analog very much a clue of who we were. And I was my first 10 years, we went from Negro on my birth certificate to colored in the middle to black by the end of that decade. And anybody remember the little jet before the bigger jet? And it was what? Deeply and thickly editorial. So our GPS on who we were was way up, even way further than whites. I went to school kind of cocky because I knew everything about white America, but they ain't know nothing about me. I always felt I had an advantage, That is reciprocated backwards. And now we have electronics connecting all of us. So what makes technology accountable? What makes the rulers of technology, government, and also industry, because we sure enough didn't hold industry accountable. We thought, boom, it's a gift from God, a record company. And so, we're going to just follow. And then the many of the masses, all they do with the masses is they move the M over. They say the masses, them asses. And so where's our cultural GPS when we know automatically of this program? And we know like a majority, and those that don't know, that ain't in the know, making them feel like they stupid. Like, oh, you don't know? This program goes in? Oh, it's the other way around. Few know and most don't about something that's gonna end up affecting every single person in our neighborhood, in our families. So I think maybe the job, I knew that when I came in as being an artist in 1987, I knew my job was to be a prism. You know what a prism does, right? The light comes to the person. Yeah, you a quote unquote star, right? Star spelled backwards is rats. But the light is supposed to be spread in the spectrum to everybody coming through you. So you can't say what you are. So my whole career, yo, Chuck, you did this. Chuck, you this, you this. I say, wait a minute. My majority of my career has pointed out people that have done. Most of my heroes don't appear on a stand. And pointing out was my job as a responsibility as an artist and entertainer. That comes from the same legacy line of Paul Robeson to Harry Belafonte, who just transitioned. You know, most of my heroes, you know, it's like, how do we illuminate people that do real things, real people that do real things? We knew some of that turn was in 1972. I have all the old heads, OGs tell me like, yeah, Chuck, we had real heroes. But the minute they came out with blaxploitation and blacks in movies, then we went from real people to people on a screen. And now we have trillions of screens and everybody's a screenager, looking at our heroes through a screen instead of real life heroes like these. How do we turn that around? How do we make entertainment or I would say the transmission of signals accountable and responsible? Real people have to do that. They could get into okay, what's going on Instagram and Facebook? You know what? This is a real situation. How do we turn around real heads out there who are influenced so heavily by the screens that they don't believe anybody in front of their face? How do we make somebody look at, you can ask your teacher real questions instead of asking your screen and Googling it, asking the unknown? You know? How do we separate what's a bot and an Afro bot from somebody that's right up in your crib? You got people out there talking about, yeah, I'm gonna change this. And they can't even change people in their crib. So here's another thing. We can't let the entertainment make light of scholarship. The minute we started making light of people who have spent the time learning a skill in scholarship, when people like, oh, so who are you? What do you do? Oh, you never heard of me. I just, I'm a doctor, but nobody's heard of me. But they're gonna talk to about an entertainer that walks across the street and they're gonna get the most fanfare. We gotta turn that around. Artists and entertainers and industry, they are there to point to real people doing real things for real people. And if we don't turn that around, you're gonna be a country that's always chasing its tail, and we're gonna be at the bottom of it. I knew very early on in my career, I go to a country in Africa, yo, Chuck D, how are you? Yeah, this is Chuck D, the entertainer. Nope, I don't bring water to this country. I'm not changing industry in this country. I'm not doing, I am here to entertain, and I got a little message in the music, which sometimes won't apply in that country either. Like you say, fight the power in Cuba, they be like, nah. You know what I'm saying? Listen, I've been to many countries, they say, look, do the songs, don't talk to the people. And the number one rule is somebody that travels around the world, you must obey the laws of wherever you go. Don't get it twisted. Ain't nobody was gonna bring me back like Brittany Griner, y'all. So I paid attention, but what can you bring to hometown? You got to make this like common folk knowledge. If we don't make these giants common folk knowledge and we waiting for LeBron's next stats, we twisted in the wrong direction. For those in this room, being anonymous is one thing, but at the same time, it might take a little bit of like, yeah, I got this degree, I run this company, yeah, what, Because you're gonna get it out of somebody who making their first mixtape 16 years old on lean on a private jet. You rather have that 14-year-old look at somebody and say, yeah, I got an MBA, I run this company, we putting these people in jobs and all that. Make that 15-year-old respect that as much as they respect something that's just hurling across a screen. Yeah. And that's the job of those in the powers that be.
I think, to your point, Ken, we're living in a time where content creators are looked at as heroes of some sort, as, these people that you look up to and hashtag living my best life, which probably 9 times out of 10 is not true. But the power of that narrative through content creators, I think, is something that everybody should be thinking about and partnering with them. So last month I was watching a video on a woman that worked at the CIA, and she was telling us that the way that they came up with some of the disguises, they actually went and spoke to magicians. Said, how do you create an illusion? Because we have to create illusions, and sometimes we need to put on a mask, looks 100% real, and 30 seconds later it needs to be under our arm, we need to look completely different. How would you do that as a magician, right? So I got to thinking as you're talking, the power of engaging people around the table to talk about narrative. What would a young person say that would resonate with a 15-year-old? What language do they use? They probably don't use criminal justice, right? Or how do you think about getting out of that system and out of that environment? So the power of storytellers and surrounding yourself with technologists and people that are on the cutting edge of just creating something out of their head are people that you need to surround yourself with as you're thinking about changing the narrative. What do you all think about that? And who would you like to be around that can help you think through not only changing the narrative, but scaling it to the degree that Chuck is talking about, where we're normalizing it and making it really public?
Well, I will talk about the importance of narrative and storytelling. I'll just say it from a perspective of inquiries I get from people all across the country who find out that I've done a panel or something at South by Southwest with Larry. Like, I can't even tell you the amount of letters I've gotten from people from prison who said they've read Larry's book and how it's impacted them about what's possible for them to do something just with the power of his story. For me, I get letters all the time from my homies, et cetera, and they talk about, you know, hey, how can I get into tech? How can I get into the knowledge-based economy? How can I get into business on the back end of things, right? And it's sad because a lot of these, some of them are my homies, but then I get letters from people across the country who have seen me on a documentary or some other thing. And I recognize that I can't help everybody by myself. And I know that Larry can't help everybody by himself. And it's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about this work is because the reason I'm in the position I'm in is because other people supported me, right? I had a great support system when I got out. People saw something in me I didn't even see in myself. And it really turned me into being a servant leader. And I listened to brothers who are in solitary. I listen to sisters in prison who I go in and talk to, and they say that, you know, something I said changed their life, and now they think something's possible. The reason I do what I do and think storytelling is so important is because I want to open up doors for other people. I call it like the Harriet Tubman effect, where I feel it's an obligation for me to go back and kick open doors and bring people to the other side and give them access to a life when they get out of prison, and to change the minds of the people who are the decision makers, which most of the time are the policy makers and the business leaders. I think that everybody in this room can help. I think everybody in the country can help, right, by reaching out to people and telling the stories that you do know. And if you don't know stories, you know, work with me and Larry and others to be able to share the stories of the positive people and the people that are doing positive things out there to open doors and change hearts and minds for people to provide other space and opportunity. So I think through documentaries, which we're working on, I know Larry's working on a documentary, I'll let him speak to that. Documentary I'm working on around fair chance hiring, speaking to people like Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase and other businesses who are investing in fair chance hiring programs. That's really the power, is to take away the stigma that we saw in the 80s and 90s from people like John Walsh on America's Most Wanted and Cops and all these Dateline and crime shows that pick out these isolated incidences, and then it causes people to paint a broad stroke for everybody, right? And that's simply not the case. There's just thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are looking to rebuild their lives in a positive way when they get home and be a positive force in society.
Yeah, I can't add much to that. With the Jordan brand, storytelling is something that we really focused on and have. I think that's been a big part of us being able to build the brand to where it is. And my hope and plan is that the same type of focus and the same type of results we were able to have with telling stories, we can apply that same approach and have that same type of results in terms of telling stories around people being able to redeem themselves and to change their lives and build a new life for themselves. Also, my first job was selling Jet and Ebony magazine at 9 years old, door to door in my neighborhood. I sold Jet. Jet cost 15 cents at the time. I made a nickel off each Jet. and ebony was 35 cents. I made 15 cents off each ebony. And I was making book back then. I was making some big coin back then, for me anyway.
Now we know where he got his business acumen.
Chuck, what do you think about engaging the storyteller community, young tech leaders, to, surround Ken and Larry to build a narrative that could scale and be normalized?
Well, it's imperative. You got to tell your own story. We're at a time right now where everybody is funneling their story through their platform. Look, everybody either they got an Android or an iPhone. There's not a third phone. These battles have been going on for years. At the end of the day, they're going to say everybody's going to lean into what comes up out of that. We have to somehow figure out a way to refunnel these signals to us in a building way. Artificial intelligence, it's never going to get dumber. It's not going to get dumber. Matter of fact, the speed of AI is happening so quick, especially I'm a creator. I'm in the creative field, right? And I have to be able to teach people with my analog ways to learn how to dance with AI, dance with technology. Remember, there's this that governs the dance. The minute you go in there and think that, okay, it's all over and we ain't gonna get no jobs and jobs are gonna be out, you can figure out a way how to grapple and dance with it. It won't be easy. Especially in the creative, we have people like, oh, I'll just go to Chat, GP or whatever and come up with something in 3 seconds. However, you cannot let that have the human feel to it. So we have to kind of steer our conversations. And the leaders, it's not a lot. Leaders are people with ideas. Ideas are the marriage between administration, management, and creative. And they have to be bold enough to say, listen, the ideas to actually govern the mindset right now, the next 3 to 5 years is so important because the world is watching and the world is moving at a speed. Look, movements mean the world and the earth ain't never gonna stop. It's moving underneath us. So you gotta adapt year by year. Even in everybody's businesses and jobs, it's moving very quick. And if they can replace a human being with a couple of buttons, you know that they will. You know that many of us will. Because they say, oh man, I ain't gotta go through no headache either. Pressing that button. Oh, no insurance staff? Pressing that button. But it has a realm of diminishing returns on society. And society is very quick in this country right here to look at undesirables, disposables, people that masses that they could get rid of if they could get rid of it. And I'm not a conspiracy theory person either. However, there's already that narrative that's out there that's going to be, what do you call it? What do they call it about eaters? What do they call it? What do they call it? Non-usable eaters. Yeah, it's just like the population that we don't need. You need brains in any operation, and you need bold brains. And being anonymous, right? And I always mess up anonymity, which I got to practice 3 times before I say it. But that ain't the way to go in this next couple of years. If you got something, say something. If you are something, be something. Like, yeah, this is me. Because being quiet in the shadows and I don't want to be other, that shit is going to lead the young 12-year-old to follow something that's bold enough to say, I'm the shit.
1000%.
And we need real people saying and being bold for a while.
Ken, before you, don't lose your thought. Don't lose your thought. To that point, how many people know, well, who created the color monitor? Who created talk to text and voice over IP? Who coined the term the Internet of Things? A black man and a black woman. Why isn't that popular knowledge? Why? Same thing here, to your point. We need people to raise their voice, raise their profile.
Smart people don't want to talk their ass off. Smart people just want to be like, I don't know, I might be talking so much and this idiot might have a gun. I mean, I'm going to keep it low. I mean, look, can I say this? The minute that guns became on the influx, that took the person who was necessarily smart to say, because I'm coming from New York. Before, in the 70s, okay, you a little person talking shit, right? You go to the block, everybody on the corner. Like, you gonna either be smart, beat up, or come back to the corner smarter. But gun culture starts, it changed it like overnight. Oh yeah, I'm gonna come back to the corner and I'm gonna spray the corner. So therefore, what's a smart person to do? A smart person gonna be wise. I go up down the street from Eddie and Charlie Murphy. Now you know their mouths are running. They from Brooklyn too, and like that. A smart person gonna be like, I might as well zip it because this little is crazy and he gonna spray it and he gonna go to jail or whatever or get shot. So I'm gonna just quietly silence myself. So we've seen the calculated silencing of intelligence, hood intelligence, school intelligence in the black neighborhood silenced since 1985. So therefore, you take what? Since 1985, 40 years, right? 40 years of the smartest person who, before that, everybody used to look up to. You know what? Don't fuck with them. That cat's the smartest one. Don't fuck with them, right? We see 40 years of the smartest people like this. And who's become the loudest? The dumbest motherfucker. Listen, I'm giving you to the real. You took the person that used to get told, sit your ass in the corner with a dunce cap, and you crowned them the last 40 years. So therefore, it floats so high that you got a presidential candidate who feels he can say anything. Oh yeah, she's not black, fuck it. I was like, what? And intelligent people are still like, And the whole world who thrive on intelligence looking from the outside in at this movie and say, well, how long is that shit gonna happen? And at the end of the movie credits, you see a whole bunch of names that ain't ours. Listen, I'm telling you, this has been such a downhill spiral already planned out and mapped out. We need smart, accomplished people to yell and says, listen, man, I'm smart. I'm not no stupid motherfucker. And we've been polite. Yes. Cats have been like cordial. Of course, they're not going to be the loudest one in the room because man, this shit's ridiculous. It's a loud talking bird, like whatever. I saw the Twilight Zone episode. Remember the dude talking his ass off and all of a sudden had to cut out his tongue? You know what I'm saying?
Sounds like a good idea.
This is where we at. Don't be neutralized the next 10 years because this is what the masses follow. The masses follow the ones that feel like they're the boldest in the room and they want to find people that have accomplishments, people that have persevered. I got caught up, so now what's my way out, man? I want to, and lockdown, the person that has the most mental sometimes got the most respect because everybody's kind of neutralized, and the person that's wise, the person that could tone down the temperature, the person that can even out the discussion, the basic judge of the inside, OG, is like, oh man, I can't come in here my first day and start talking my ass off. This is another thing. We never hear about the stories inside. We always hear about the stories on the way to the inside, and for some reason, when it comes down to black people, black men, black existence, they shut the door right there, and it's just what? It's death or that silence, and then on the outside, nobody hears it again.
And then the only thing you get is what they show you on TV with the shows and all that make it look a whole lot different than it really is.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ken.
I just want to build on what Chuck said about boldness because I looked at the people in the room and it's very humbling for me that when we asked the question about who in here knew somebody that was just as impacted as a relative friend or whatever, like 98% of the room raised their hands, right? And what my deepest desire is and passion is that we all raise our hands to say that we actually don't have someone we know that's just as impacted. And I think in a room like this full of decision makers, like every single person that raised their hand is in a position to support, whether it's through policy, whether it's through resources, whether it's through hiring somebody, whether it's through starting an apprenticeship program, an internship program for somebody who's just as impacted. We have the power to do that with the people that are in this room. I say that in every room that I'm in, because I don't want us to just raise hands and say we know our cousin Ray Ray or my auntie or my brother or whoever that's doing 5, 10, 15 years in the joint, and then when they get out, they have nowhere to turn, right? So I just wanted us to reflect on that for a minute about how many people in here really had somebody who was just as impacted and what power we have in this room to actually make a difference and a change for those folks.
Thank you for being here. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your night.